You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey everybody, check out the Break the Bell podcast, where we believe your voice is your most powerful weapon. For a weekly dose of our take on what's going on in the world, mixed with a side of history. Find us wherever podcasts are found or on social media handle at Break the Bell Pod. And most importantly, never stop talking.
Prepare yourself. You're on the run with Remso W. Martinez.
Everyone wants to be on a list these days for some reason. Sometimes you don't want to be on a list. But you know what list I wish I was on? I wish I was on the list of people that caught COVID and didn't even know they had it. Because by the time you're listening to this, it's week 3 now. And the COVID symptoms are basically gone, as I mentioned last episode. But now I'm dealing with the aftermath of the pneumonia symptoms. And like, my gosh, I've never had pneumonia in my life. So to get it at my age right now, it really took me out of action. But, that's about it. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved I caught it. In terms of the 2020 curses that have lingered into this new year. It's one of those things where it's like, I got it. I'm good. I can move on with my life. Hopefully, I'll be back up to 100% energy soon. But I'll be okay. That's a better outcome than a lot of people right now. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic itself. I'm talking about businesses where 2 out of 3 small businesses in America who had to close down in 2020 are still either closed down indefinitely into this year, or they're just permanently shut down totally. Millions of American children cannot go back to school. Thousands of local organizations can no longer meet. And when it comes to the American church, this has been one of those areas that has been quite contentious, but now it seems like the topic has somewhat died down. When I say the American church, I'm talking about really, American Christians specifically in the United States over the past year. Their ability to meet has been, depending on the state, completely shut down. Their ability to really do anything has been under constant surveillance. And if you're in the state of California, you can't even sing hymns. I'll be honest, I have not gone to my church in probably 7 months. They started doing virtual stuff, but they took a turn in a direction that I disagree with. They went very much on the side of everyone needs to shut down, everyone needs to stay home. It's okay to riot under certain circumstances. And I just, I looked at that and I said, what the heck is going on? It's one of those areas that I've been somewhat disconnected with, especially since I left Liberty University in 2017 after I graduated. I'll be honest, I've been kind of lapsed in terms of my church attendance. So for many people who that really matters to, it's been even more difficult. And that's what we'll be talking about today, the lasting impact of the pandemic and the lockdowns on American churches. For that, I went ahead and invited Ericka Andersen onto the program today. She's been a freelance writer and digital media marketing professional for 12 years. She writes about addiction, church planting, mental health, politics, policy, culture, fitness. Has been also published at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Review, and more. She's also a regular contributor to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Ericka, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
So I've got to also bring up your podcast. How's that going and everything? What's it called again?
It's called Worth Your Time, and mostly speaking to Christian women, whether they're entrepreneurs or politicians or ministry leaders. And it's really fun. I get to talk to so many inspiring women, and that's the main reason I love doing the podcast.
That's awesome. And I'll go ahead and include links to everything in the show notes today, folks. I'm a bit groggy if you haven't been able to tell. So if there's something that I did not mention, bring it up. I will go ahead and make sure you get the links. But Ericka, in my area of the Beltway, churches took one of two directions. They either just completely shut down indefinitely and they're sending out newsletters, or they're doing the online approach. And I think it's so funny because for years I remember pastors that I know they would talk about how Facebook is the devil and everything, and now they've got signs in front of their churches saying, "Watch us live on Facebook every Sunday." So, they've been trying for the most part, and a lot of the churches around here have been trying to do more outreach in the best way that they can, food deliveries, checking up on the elderly, calling people that have been dealing with job loss, depression, issues like that. So I don't want to say they've like completely dissolved, but it seems like they've completely given up the ability to do anything else. And then for a lot of the churches that were fighting back across the country in terms of how they can meet, whether they could do drive-in church services, whether they can, just even be within 6 feet of each other on church grounds, it's basically died down. It's like those who were resisting were basically crushed, and everyone else has basically dwindled their congregations down incredibly. I know of one pastor whose congregation of around 400 is now like 50, if you just go by the YouTube numbers. So what's going on right now? Because this is one of those things where when it went quiet, I realized, oh, shoot, something has happened.
Yeah, it's, I feel like the church is actually one of the biggest stories to come out of the pandemic, because it was such a sort of dichotomy to, you see people inside Target and grocery stores and all of these places with basically no restrictions outside of having to wear a mask. And yet then people weren't allowed to worship together, even in smaller congregations. And so it didn't really make sense. It still doesn't make a lot of sense that there was a restriction on one, but not the other. But right now, so the numbers are, and I told you, I just got done looking at some of these stats, so this is very timely. But so when the pandemic sort of took over the nation last March, only 3% of churches did not shut down their buildings. So vast majority shut down.
So we're talking they didn't go with any of the restriction criteria at all, right?
No, yeah. So the 3% that stayed open, I don't know the details of, what they did or didn't do. Like maybe they required masks or something, but the vast majority closed their doors and went all virtual. Most churches did. If they didn't have virtual, they got it. Some didn't, smaller rural types of churches definitely never got there. But now, as of December, 4 out of 5 churches in the country have reopened. However, attendance is way down. And I can speak from my own experience at my church, which we opened up back in July. But I would say our attendance is maybe a fifth of what it was before the pandemic started. And we also, at my church, they do masks, they do temperature checks, they do social distancing, which sometimes it seems a little silly because there's so few people there and we're like very spaced out to wear a mask singing is kind of like annoying. But at the same time, I'm glad they're open and I'm really glad to go there and be meeting. And then as you mentioned, the Supreme Court just ruled finally that California can open churches again. I mean, just now this happened. So it's crazy that Californians have had to wait almost a full year to be able to, I guess, legally worship or whatever. But the real concern is, what does this lack of going to church ultimately mean for a population that was already sort of struggling in the faith and spirituality realm? What does this, getting them out of the already bad habits they had, what does that mean for the future and the many ways in which church going actually affects like our individual lives and our society?
Yeah, I mean, I read an article a while back from the Institute on Religion and Democracy, and what they showed some good news and they showed some bad news. They showed that Gen Z, so the generation after millennials, I think born after 1995, they are more willing to actually attend a church regularly than their millennial counterparts, strangely. Millennials started this trend of actually attending church more often than their parents. It wasn't by much. It was by like 5% or so, but it was an increase compared to their parents' generation. And then with Gen Z, they seem to be outdoing the millennials by a little bit. Now, I think most of Gen Z, they're in college or they're about to graduate from college at this point. But overall, American church attendance is down. It's been, on a giant decrease since 2012. What makes it somewhat uncomfortable now is that in the past year, I became an Anglican Catholic, and just before I started attending Mass, everything started happening, and they shut down. Then they went to all virtual services. Now what you have to do is you have to email them, and you basically have to get on a list to be pre-approved to come. Actually. Go to Mass. And what they're doing is they're prioritizing the elderly, the people that have been there for 30, 40 years. And I get it to a degree, but it's it's made it very hard to want to stay up to date with things. It's made it very hard to, really engage and learn more. And you can only do so much through phone or email. And I mean, for me, somebody that went from more the non-denominational evangelical side of Christianity towards more of this, old school sense, to put it bluntly. I mean, it's and some Christians might disagree with me on this, but Christianity is really a traditional religion. And I mean, for me, my biggest thing is I like the ceremony aspect. I like the physical, tangible aspect of it. So when I can't go to Mass and do that type of stuff, it's a part of me that's not really getting to engage in what I believe is the high church at that point. I know for a lot of my friends that I graduate from Liberty University with, they're like, well, church is with you. You are the church. And it's yeah, but is it? Is it really?
Yeah. I mean, I think the church, yes, I don't think, well, the church is not just you. I mean, you are not just you can have a personal relationship with God, but the church is 2 or 3 at least, and that can be on Zoom. That doesn't mean that it, you can't call it a gathering. You can't call it the church. However, gathering, and especially in the sense that you're talking about in a Catholic church or an Anglican church, where so many of those rituals and the things that you do together are such an important part of the ceremony, that stuff is not going to take on the same meaning when you're sitting on your couch, And so I think that, and the other thing I was going to mention is just that I think it was 1 in 5 church-going millennials, I believe was the stat, haven't been to church at all, Zoom or in person. They just stopped going. And so my fear is that, once people are out of the habit of going, that it's going to be really hard to start that habit back up again. And many churches continue to be, and some churches are still virtual, and then others have these limits on capacity, have all of these barriers mask requirements, temperature checks, and all these things. And so ultimately, we're coming out of this pandemic very traumatized, all of us. And the thing that we need most, honestly, is a faith grounding. We need something bigger than all of this to sort of pull ourselves out of it and move forward to 2021. And the very best way to do that is to have a faith community. But I'm just worried that people are going to have gotten out of the habit. They're not going to be proactive about finding it. And that could be really, really bad for levels of personal happiness, for the way our society functions with things like generosity and volunteerism and civic duty. All of that is very related to how strong the church is in society.
Yeah, and I mean, right now, my girlfriend's brother is studying to become a pastor. And for him to start out, and I really don't know how church planting actually operates, so I'm just going off of what I've witnessed from his experience. But he's starting a church in Pasadena, Maryland. I hope he doesn't get mad that I just outed where he is. But, he's starting a church there, and what he has to do before he can actually go through the process of finding land, actually constructing a church and everything, what he has to do is he has to start doing services in a high school gym on Sundays. So he got all the permits, he got all the approvals from the school, but then he got something from the state government basically saying you're not allowed to actually have people in a school building for non-school or non-local government purposes. And he was like, well, everyone just approved it. We're going to abide by all the social distancing, all the capacity rules and everything. And they were basically just like, no. And then what he wanted to do was he was just like, maybe I can get approval and I can go ahead and actually just start constructing a church. And in terms of local land permits for like commercial use and stuff like that, building a new church is not deemed as essential. So he can't do that because he's putting all the construction workers and everyone at risk for an unnecessary job build. So I'm listening to all of this, trying to wrap my head around it. And it's just like, this is intentional. Like if somebody wanted to build a new Amazon fulfillment center, that crap would be up by like tomorrow. But what they've basically done is they've taken a side. And what they've basically said is that, religion in America doesn't matter. And I don't want to feel like, I'm sorry, I don't want to like, exclude anyone. I don't know how it's been for the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Buddhist community. I do know that the local Buddhist Lotus Temple in my county, they've basically like their congregation's like halved. Like they just said, we can only take half of you and the rest of you have to watch stuff online. And it's just how it's going to have to be indefinitely. So, I mean, I feel like this is just, this isn't just necessarily an anti-Christian move by many state governments. I feel like this is an anti-religion move overall. Because if they're doing it to one group of people, they're obviously doing it to others, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think usually these things do affect all religions. I mean, when you think about religious liberty issues, like it covers them all. We just hear more about Christianity because obviously that's the vast majority of people in the United States. But 100%, I think they're all being affected. I don't know. I haven't heard from any of those communities myself, but I think, I can tell you that like faith leadership is very concerned about, the impact of this. And then also the pastors and things are extremely exhausted right now because they have had to go, above and beyond to make sure that they are reaching their congregations in the best way possible, online when they can't meet in person. And they're lacking volunteers. Like it's hard to have people to do childcare for churches that are open. Just the whole, game of how things were run before has been turned on its head, and people are having to sort of work with the bare bones of what's available right now. And, many people are doing it, joyfully and just trying to get through it and realize that God is doing something. I mean, I personally believe God is doing something bigger than we can see right now. But it has been a very stressful year for church leadership.
Is anyone that you know of, is anyone talking about what, this whole situation looks like when things can get back to normal? Because I feel that from what I've been witnessing, everyone is just kind of taking things day by day right now. And it's not even their fault. I'm not saying that they should, definitely be planning to, go back to normal next week. I mean, nobody knows when that's going to happen. I think President Joe Biden today said that we're going to go ahead and wear masks for another year. And you've got some people saying you have to wear like 20 of those. And everyone wants to get vaccinated by, like April or something like that. I'm probably wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's like there's got to be some thinking of, okay, how do we bring people back? And it's not even how do we bring in new people. It's how do we get the people that were here and now they're just in the habit of it's just not a priority for them in this new world, because it seems like everyone's just kind of quiet. They're just trying to do things day by day right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There have been some statistics about this. The best place to find any information is from Barna Research. They have some great information. They've been very closely analyzing everything to do with church and COVID this whole year. And, what they found is that, I believe this was Barna. I could be quoting from another company, but regardless, I saw it somewhere reputable that said, most people, say they're going to go back to the same way they attended before. Most people are saying that's what they're going to do. That's their plan. However, how does that actually happen in reality? I don't know. And then, don't forget the fact that, there's lots of people out there that weren't going before, but we want to get them back too, even though it had been a longer a longer time. That's actually sort of one of my passions is speaking to women who, because there's a huge, thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there who say they are Christians and they haven't been to church in years. They don't go. And so to me, these two things are sort of combined, and I have a passion for reaching out.
I'm sorry I cut you off, but like, do you think that they're just like culturally Christian, or like they're actually like in terms of their faith they are?
I definitely think some of it's a cultural Christian thing, but I think a lot of people are maybe just sort of not super mature in their faith, or they, were more serious about it years ago. And in the busyness of life, or having had a bad experience at a church that didn't work for them, they've sort of let it go. But what we're seeing is that, what I found is that women, in a Barna survey, women said that the number one thing that they would like to improve in their lives is getting back to church and improving their faith. But yet on that same survey, they put that as the last priority. And so there's this desire to get back to church and prioritize faith, but people aren't doing it. And so it's like, how do we hit on, how do we get them to say, let's prioritize this? This is actually important. You need to get something out of the way so that you can put this up front. And, that is sort of where I'm trying to go right now with things that I'm writing. It's what I'm working on a book, and that's what my book is about. So yeah, this is a huge thing for me.
So let's kind of pivot and talk more about that. 2021 is basically just 2020 part 2. I really I'm at the point where I just stopped predicting when things will get normal. It's just, I have no clue what's happening anymore. But in terms of the challenges for most churches, is there anything new or different that they're encountering this year that they weren't encountering at the height of the pandemic? Or are things basically the same?
I think, at the height, they were mostly closed. So now I think that the struggle is just getting people back in the doors.
So it's better just by default.
Yeah, it's better by default. But a lot of people just still aren't going because the virus is still contagious. A lot of people have just gotten into the habit of staying home and watching. I've heard some people say they enjoy that. I personally cannot pay attention. I really can't listen to a sermon sitting in my living room. It just doesn't work. Plus, I have little kids.
It's already hard. I'm not gonna lie. An Anglican Catholic service is just not the most entertaining thing.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where when you're there, that is your focus.
Well, I think, yeah, exactly. I don't look at my phone when my pastor is preaching in front of me. But I think, the main thing is that churches are still, having to put a lot of hard work in, is that they are still trying to offer, the both of them, the in-person and the online. They want the online experience to still be good for those people that are worried about, gathering, yet they want to make the in-person service good for the people that do want to be there. And so that's sort of double work. And my church is very small. They only have 4 people on staff. And so I know that they have been sort of, and we lost our pastor. So we have an interim pastor. Lord. So it's been a crazy year. And I don't know how mega churches are faring. I haven't really dug into that too much. I think most of them are meeting again, but lots of services, caps on attendance and things like that. So I think
there are 2 mega churches within 15 minutes of my house, and ironically, one of them opened up in March of 2020. So I feel kind of bad for them.
Oh, geez.
But what they did, and I see this as an opportunity for a lot of growth, for a lot of positive things to come out of. What they did was they basically they didn't double the number of services, but they kept the regular services for people that were in the habit previously before everything, and we all just started wearing sweatpants all day. And then what they started doing was they actually started focusing on more content. You would have the Sunday service, but then during the week they'll have conversations and live streams with the pastor, with the youth pastor, or they'll just have an afternoon where they're just playing music. And I look at that and it's for a lot of those people that, these mega churches, they have larger staff. It's if they're not going to be doing much because there's not much they can actually do, I don't see that as an excuse not to try and do anything extra. And that's the one thing that I've been somewhat impressed about. It's that they've been creative in terms of how to keep people not just engaged on Sunday, but how to keep people engaged regularly throughout the week.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of that. I mean, my church was doing nightly prayer for like 3 months on Facebook Live. So they were really getting it out there. But I think, in terms of opportunity for growth, one of the things we know is that people make decisions about faith in times of transition, tragedy, or trauma. And, you could say all three of those things have happened to our society in the past year. And so what I'm hoping is that we will see people, sort of reevaluating their lives, for the first time for some people, we were, they felt fully out of control. There was nothing you could do. You realize maybe that, there is something, you need to have something a little deeper in your life. And so I'm hoping that this, and actually, I know I'm full of stats, but there, and I can't remember, but there's a good chunk of people who have said that their faith has increased over 2020. And so I think that's promising. I actually have a really good friend who just started going to church for the first time. Like she had kind of grown up Catholic here and there, but never been real consistent. And then in the past, 15 years, probably only went a few times. And so she had been really feeling this draw to go to church, and checked out a few online services. She had a bad experience with one of the online services, but then finally, found a bigger church in the area where she lives, went to it, and she has been going every week for the first time in person now. And so her story really gives me a lot of hope because, she thinks that it could be, partially the pandemic that was part of that draw or part of the sort of formula that got her thinking like, I need to be doing this. And so I think that there is opportunity there for people to start making decisions about their faith in ways that they weren't before.
For the number of churches nationwide that have closed, I think it was like 1 out of 10 or something is like completely shut down. Like people stop tithing, people stop doing anything. Like it's one of those things where it's like, this is kind of a big deal. And
yeah,
if you're somebody,
60% churches down on tithing.
Oh my gosh. In a way, and I'm trying to word this correctly. In a way, if a church just if a congregation like completely dies, it's one of those situations where it's like, is it really the pandemic's doing, or is this really that congregation's doing?
Well, that's a great point that actually kind of relates to church planting, which you were talking about. And something I learned in the past couple of years is that churches are actually meant to have a life cycle. They are not meant to last forever. And, honestly, some churches that closed down, that may have been something that needed to happen for new life to spring up in that place. And so, the thing about church planting is that studies show that the more, if a church plants a church out of their own church, that church is more likely to survive. And so the sort of the life cycles and the, moving forward of creating new churches is actually great for faith in America. And so if a church dies, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
So it's kind of like a brush fire mentality. Like you've got to kind of blaze the forest. So hopefully something stronger and better and healthier will come up in its place.
Yeah, sometimes that's very true when it comes to churches. You need something new. And it's something I had never thought about until a couple of years ago when I started reading more about church planting. And it's kind of fascinating when you think about it. So I do think in that way, this pandemic, I'm not saying it's great news to hear about churches that have closed down for good. I definitely am not celebrating that. But at the same time, I think it's like, okay, that happened. Maybe some of that needed to happen. What's next? We're always looking ahead. And, we know as Christians, we believe that the church is not going anywhere. And so there's always another plan. There's always another step. And, we're just trusting God to lead that. But the church will always exist and will not, be shut down for good. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like prior to the pandemic, I was already kind of emotionally ready for all of these changes because, since I was 18, I was a Methodist, And like, the Methodists in the United States have been the butt of the joke amongst the Christian community for a while now. I mean, the joke right now is you're going to start having African missionaries come actually do, missionary work to former Methodists in the United States. And it's like, that was one of the situations where, a lot of people kind of just lost their shit, so to speak. And they're like, well, I'm never going to another service again. Or, oh my gosh, the whole thing is crumbling down. And, what's going to happen to Christianity in America? Because the United Methodist Church is one of the largest Christian denominations in the United States. And I was on the conservative side of all their problems, which, I mean, there are a whole laundry list of things. And I just kind of sat back and I looked at it and I'm like, this isn't like what is worth saving here at this point? Because at this point, it's really just a corporate body. It's a corporate body that is split on a bunch of issues. And it seems like one side, the more liberal side, is at the point now where they just want to completely do a hostile takeover. So it's like, is it worth that? Or is it worth kind of just, divorcing, so to speak, and moving on? Because it's like, if you can't come together on fundamental things, you probably shouldn't stay together. And that's, I think that was actually one of the better things for me, because it really made me evaluate my faith. So I look at a lot of people now where they're dealing with, inner political issues within their churches over the lockdowns and everything else, where they don't like watching stuff on YouTube or Facebook, so they just have no attachment to their church anymore. And I'm kind of like, if this is what has to be done in order to show what people truly believe, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the church has been under scrutiny and it's had problems since its foundation. This idea that this is anything new and that this is the worst stage in the history of the church, I'm not of that mindset anymore. I just think it is natural, and this is, whether it happened now or happened later, it's going to happen again.
Well, I love that you have this story, honestly, because that's a huge part of my book, where I've spoken to a lot of people about basically switching not their faith, but either a denomination or the way that they practice their faith because of some, negative associations from the past. And I think what's interesting is people don't really recognize that, like, you can do that. I mean, maybe they know it intellectually, but like, don't ever do it. But it's like, if you went to a Catholic church your whole life and you aren't into that, like, you have other options. If you went to a Baptist church your whole life, where you were Pentecostal or whatever it may be, and you don't like, say, the legalism, or you don't like, the hellfire and brimstone that was preached at your Southern Baptist church. Well, there are so many other churches and denominations, and now there are tons of house churches. That's another big movement to choose from. And so my big message is to say to people, try something else. Like, we all have this innate desire to have a faith. I mean, we are all spiritual beings. Like, every single person is a spiritual person, and we were all born with this desire for God in our hearts. And so I'm not a proponent of just like, like letting God just be whatever. Like, I want people, of course, as a Christian, I want them to find Christianity. However, I think just opening your mind to the possibility that what you grew up with isn't necessarily, right for you, it is something to think about. Like, there's a lot of stuff to try. And so I'm encouraging people to do that, and to just say, hey, what if? And so I'm hoping that's the message I can send with my book.
Absolutely. And do you have a title yet?
I don't have a title yet. So
that's always like one of the worst parts of writing.
Yeah, I have a tentative title, but I don't want to say it because I don't know if that's going to be
You don't want to jinx it. You don't want to jinx it. I totally understand.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but it's the book is currently with an agent, so we're shopping it around, and hopefully somebody will buy it.
Well, when you do have a title and when everything does work out as it should, definitely come back and let's talk more about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Ericka, I wish we could go on for like another hour, except right now I've been muting my mic constantly, coughing and wheezing like a madman. So I've got to go, take a Benadryl nap or something. If people want to catch up with everything you're doing, look at some of your other books, follow you on social media, how could they do so?
Well, I'm really pushing my new Substack. So erickaandersen.substack.com. You can subscribe there and get stuff, but also just erickaandersen.com. You can find social media, all the things. So
perfect. And I'll include everything in the show notes. Ericka, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Folks, I know that the episodes have been a little bit shorter the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to, get my lungs back to where they were prior. I feel like, I've been smoking since like 10 years old or something. That's how it feels right now. But I promise once I get back to full capacity, we'll keep going longer. I'll be more energetic. I might throw a joke here and there like I used to. I promise I won't be like this forever. But thank you for your well wishes, your prayers. A lot of you have been reaching out, on Facebook and Twitter and just saying, hey, hoping that my recovery gets better. It's going on 3 weeks now, and I'm not absolutely worried because I'm making progress. But please, we're not going to talk about vaccines. You all know what my opinion of that whole process is. But really, if you're feeling sick, please go get tested. It takes a few minutes. It's free. And this is really not something you want to pass on to somebody else. So regardless of your opinion of COVID, everything else, just know that, I'm 26 and rather healthy, and I didn't just get over it, and I'm still dealing with it now. And I caught pneumonia for the first time in my life because of it. So, please, there are people out there who are elderly, who have respiratory issues, who have weakened immune systems. The least you could do is go get tested and then take the proper precautions afterwards. As always, thank you so much again. We'll be back later in the week. I'm Remso W. Martinez. Be safe, be good. Good night.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com, like The Chris Spangle Show, Liberty Explained, The Brian Nichols Show, The Boss Hog of Liberty, Freedom Strips with Keaton Tucker, On the Run with Remso Martinez, Gingerarchy with Tricia Stewart-Mann, Upward, Libertarian Activism, and Now Hear This. Tune in now and we're going to help you sound smarter when talking with your friends.